Good afternoon, everybody. Good evening, good morning. This is a different time for us to do this monthly webinar from ESG. I am Peter Armaly, Vice President of Customer Success for ESG. We're the customer success as a service company. We enable companies to build, operationalize, and transform their CS organizations, set and improve key metrics, and accomplish their ultimate goals of keeping and expanding customer relationships. Thanks for joining us for today's show. We'll spend about 45 to 50 minutes having a conversation, leaving some time at the end to field some questions from the audience. But please don't wait until then to submit a question. If you have one, just fire it off in the Q&A window or even the chat, and I will be monitoring that and will bring your question in if I feel it's appropriate for that moment in the conversation. The title of today's webinar is Did Totango and Catalyst Just Amp Up Customer Success? I have two guests with me today. The first is Edward Chiu, CEO of Catalyst and the co-CEO of the combined company, along with Alistair Rennie from Totango. My second guest is Michael Harnum, who's my boss, and he's the CEO of ESG. Prior to founding Catalyst in 2017 with his brother Kevin, Edward Chiu was, among other things, a CEO and an investor in startups and was the head of customer success and sales at DigitalOcean, where I suspect, you could probably correct me, Edward, but I think you probably realized there first how profound was the need for sophisticated tooling for customer success practices. He's originally from California, but resides today in New York City. Michael Harnum has been the CEO of ESG for the last 8 years, and prior to that, he was an executive sales leadership positions at ServiceSource and CenturyLink. Two fun facts about Michael: he was a player of some renown on the Princeton Tigers basketball team during his college years, and the other is that he gifts me with the most enjoyable one-on-one meetings I've ever had in my entire career, every single week. Michael's originally from Pennsylvania and resides today in Denver. Any words from either of you or both of you before we get going on the questions? I'll start with you, Edward.
Well, no wonder Michael in the beginning invited me to a basketball one-on-one shootout game, and now it all makes sense. I'm kidding. So back to your intro, yeah, I did come from a customer success background. I didn't wake up one day and just decide that, hey, I was going to start a company and go build a CS tool. For those of you that know the story, I was the CS leader, both for pre-sales and post-sales at a company called DigitalOcean. We scaled the company from nothing to about 300 million by the time that I had left, and now they're a publicly traded company. And it was there where I really saw the importance of unifying both sales and CS into a unified go-to-market motion to drive expansion revenue. It's what the leadership team wanted. It's what the board wanted. So it was there where I built my team and I built the first version of the tool that is now Catalyst today. So thank you, Peter and Michael, for having me on the podcast. And I'm excited for the topics today.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. Michael, any opening words?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. For those of you that might be impressed by that intro, just know that at the peak of my powers, the peak, my friends, I was a mediocre Ivy League basketball player. So if that can kind of ramp down your impression there, allow it to. So my career, I've operated under a couple, key principles, guiding principles that I think are relevant today in our marketplace and also relevant to the conversation. And they're simple. You've heard them before, but they apply in unique ways to different people. And so one of them is that knowledge is power, right? And so in some of my prior roles, we amassed a tremendous amount of our clients' data by interacting with their customers. And the question is always, what do you do with that? What insights can you provide? What conclusions can you come to? Recommendations can you make? How do you create a more efficient ecosystem with that knowledge that you have? And I think the same applies, today in customer success in spades, right? So we have the pleasure of working inside of a lot of large enterprise customers and providing services to them. And we get to see and meet with and talk with a lot of their customers. And so that knowledge, our challenge is how do we turn that knowledge into power, not power for us necessarily, but power for our customers so that they can act for their end users in a positive and productive way.
Thanks. Both what you both said just reminds me of things I often say on social media is that customer success is like a privileged position in the business world because you have such access and proximity to the customers that it really is a privilege to have that trust available that you can build on. And it really is about understanding how you can kind of leverage data to really help them, achieve success. So let's get going on the questions. Edward, let's start with you. It's going to be a question that probably the entire audience is hoping I ask right away, which is about the merger between Catalyst and Totango. Many industry analysts have been predicting consolidation and more private equity penetration in the tech industry for some months now, but I'm not sure many saw this one coming. Can you help us understand the major strategic and not so much the product level, but the strategic reasons why it made sense from your point of view for the two companies to merge?
Yeah, last year, I'd say, and confidently say, Catalyst was the first and only customer success platform that said, you know what, we're going to get out of the customer success category, not because we don't believe in customer success, but because we are underselling the value of customer success by putting it as a separate category versus talking about what does a whole mission and vision mean to drive customer-led growth. And that statement is the responsibility of everyone in the company, marketing, sales, CS. And when we did that, it was a huge effort. Like we took a big bet and pivoted our messaging, didn't pivot our product, but like started to focus on how do you unify different stakeholders in one tool. And it landed incredibly well. I think the entire market was incredibly receptive to it. It shocked a lot of people. Some people were very resistant to it. But we talked about, hey, how do you unify all the work from sales and CS and account management and sales engineering into one motion? And when we started to chat about this internally on how we're positioning the market, I think our competitors saw it worked well as well. And I've said this on when I've shared this story before on other forums, but Totango's team reached out to me about 4 or 5 times over the past couple of years, and I never responded. And finally, I said to myself, why not? I'll chat with them. Worst comes to worst, I'll tell them a bunch of fake stuff that I'm doing and send them in the wrong direction, and then learn a lot about what they're doing. And when I jumped onto the call, it was very refreshing because they said, look, we'll start first. We'll tell you everything that we learned in the past decade, what went well, what didn't go well, and what's wrong with us. And just to let your guard down. And now we're into the convo. I was thinking to myself, wow, these guys are screwed because they just kind of told me everything I need to know about how to take them down. And an hour goes by later, what I realized was there is a tremendous opportunity here to unify. And what was interesting was Totango said, look, we applaud you guys for pioneering and going out on a limb and saying, hey, this isn't just CS. It's about the entire go-to-market motion aligning together. And we see that a lot of CROs are now very drawn to what Catalyst is doing. There's a lot of crossover from sales leader now thinking about, hey, how do I get access to this data to drive expansion? And that's something that other CS platforms weren't able to do. So, and then on the unification part, what really landed and what really, to take a long story short, I'm sure we'll dig through more of this as this goes on. We looked at each other and it was kind of like the Spider-Man meme. Like there's a lot of similarities, but when you look at each other, what we notice the strengths of one another is what the other people need. Mm-hmm. Our customers, because we are a younger, more modern platform, we needed enterprise scale. And Totango's customers, who's been around for over a decade now, they're one of the pioneers of the space. They wanted innovation. And both sides, look, we could have gone, Totango could have completely rebuilt their UI and UX. We could have built more and more enterprise features over the next 12 to 18 months. But we took a look at our stacks, we took a look at our people, we took a look at our cultures, and we just saw that there was a tremendous fit. So over Christmas, we just spent a lot of time together. We hung out with each other. We got to know each other. And at the very end of it, we said, look, this is a great fit. And we pulled the trigger.
Yeah. And before, Michael, I'm going to ask you for maybe some thoughts on this question too. But before we do that, there's a question that came in on the Q&A from Anonymous. which I think is probably being asked by a number of people. You're talking about merging of software, but the companies are still treated as separate. And then maybe it's too early, Edward, for you to comment on that. But if you are, maybe you can give some commentary on that.
Yeah, great question from Anonymous. Look, we just merged about a month ago. Naturally, there has been a plan of attack since about November that we've been working on how to unify the two companies, and it's in the works. Without sharing some behind the scene things that if any of our competitors are on this call, which I'm sure there are, I don't want to give too much away, but I think the big point is that it's business as usual. I think that's the key thing is that like we've spoken to all of our biggest customers. None of them have felt any negative impacts to the merger. If anything, they felt the additional resources that we've brought. They love that the roadmap that we're bringing. And I think this is the one benefit that you are going to get and the market is going to get is we are going to be the first platform on the market that can say we are the best when it comes to user experience and design and quick onboarding, which is what Catalyst wins every single year on G2 Crowd for. And we're now going to have the enterprise scale and capabilities. There's platforms on there that are easier to use, and there's some platforms out there that are designed for the enterprise. We're going to be the first one that has both. And we are cherry picking, literally cherry picking the best features from both. And that's an advantage is that, I think Peter and Michael, you guys will appreciate this. For the first time, I get to go to my quote unquote competitors' customers and say, hey, what do you like and don't like about your product? And what do you like and don't like about our product? And how do we give you the best product possible?
Mhm.
And never before have I been able to talk with a competitor set of customers who I am now also the CEO of. So it's a very, very unique advantage that, I think is just one of the many, many benefits of merging two companies together in the same category.
Yeah, I think it's smart to kind of be methodical about that. I mean, having come from a couple of large companies where I was an employee, but we did acquisitions. I mean, namely Oracle does that all the time. Is you have to be really super sensitive with the customers of the company you're acquiring. You don't just want to kind of slam things together. Michael, any kind of thoughts on this particular question around more around consolidation in the industry and customer success, where it's at, that we shouldn't be surprised by this sort of a move.
I think of it in phases, Peter. So, you could argue what phase we're in the maturity of the customer success marketplace. But, let's say for the sake of discussion, we're, 2 phases into a 5 or 7 phase process, right? I think it's easier. Everything's relative, right? Nothing is easy, but it's easier to get through like phase 1 and phase 2 and to get some resources in place, get some technology in place, begin some new motions, and just get the flywheel moving. I have found, in my experience, it's much more difficult, higher degree up the hill to get into phase 3 and phase 4 and take those next steps. And in our world, what that would look like is, okay, now that I've got some of the basic fundamentals in place, how do I employ them into a successful strategy, a successful practice that is going to significantly change the way I interact with my customers based on the knowledge that I have gained and the financial outcome that I therefore should expect from that. And I think in terms of the consolidation, the opportunity that Edward spoke about, those are some of the necessary elements to help us get into the next phase of maturity in the industry to maximize the financial impact that customers of that platform could have.
Yeah,
Michael, your point just really brought up, and to actually give you an additional answer to your question, Peter, is that frankly, this market, everyone's been waiting for a freaking change. Everyone's been waiting for an injection of excitement and innovation in this space for over a decade. Like you guys have been in the CS space for a very, very long time. And I can safely say, like, I think there's both people who are excited and there's our competitors who are skeptical, but it doesn't matter. I think the fact still stands that this is one of the most exciting announcements that has happened in over a decade in this space. And why we did it and why we feel like it's going to be huge is that people are also tired of the same terminology, the same way to measure CS, the same way to look at CS. What are the best practices in driving those next level of advanced workflows in a customer success organization that I'm sure you guys are always there to help try and facilitate. We now have two companies with very, very different views. One is much more revenue centric. One is the history and foundation of CS. Now we're merging that knowledge together to really give the market and community, even if you're not a customer, a viewpoint and POV on how to drive CS in the modern way that drives revenue versus it just being a cost to the business. And sometimes that's why there is notion of like, hey, CS is not at the seat at the table. I hate it when people say that because that couldn't be farther from the truth. It couldn't be farther from what actually exists in organizations. It's just all a matter of how does that company think about revenue, which I'm sure we'll talk about later on.
Yeah, and there's a couple of questions in the Q&A, but I think from David, both Davids, and they're good questions, but I think I'll hold on those for a little bit and just move forward with some of the questions I've written, and maybe some of the answers will surface during this conversation. So again, Edward, we're going to kind of, it's not like Michael and I are going to tag team on you, but it makes sense that you're the one to be the focus of the question mostly today. So customer success as a business practice has a different look and feel depending on the industry and the company. Of course, we all know that. Some CS practices are very narrowly defined and only focus on, say, on onboarding and adoption. Others have a broader remit, including support, services, retention, expansion, and advocacy. So with all that context, what, in terms of this merger, is there are there areas of the typical customer success practice that you think we should expect to see improvement on, sooner rather than later?
I think as it relates to this merger, last year you all saw that Catalyst was one of the first, actually the first customer success platform in the market that received funding, venture funding outside of the venture capital space from two players, one from ServiceNow and the other from Databricks. And that's a trend that we're seeing across the board. And let's start with Databricks is that every leader outside of CS, every CEO, every CFO, right at this moment in 2024, they want to be methodically data-driven when it comes to understanding where are their areas of opportunity. It's why companies like Snowflake, why companies like Databricks are doing so incredibly well, because there is just this organic shift on how do I centralize all my data in a singular data lake so that I understand what's going on. If you are in CS, if you are in revenue and you don't understand what a data lake is, you don't understand what a data warehouse is, you are not partnering with your engineering team on trying to understand what are the core customer attributes that you need to be able to identify from this data lake, you are behind on the times because your competitors are accessing that data, automating off of that data, driving workflows on that data, creating significant efficiencies amongst their post-sales and pre-sales team, identifying expansion and revenue opportunities off of that data. So that was one component, and we're super excited and humbled to have Databricks as an investor and partner. That's one signal. The other signal and the other evolution is ServiceNow. ServiceNow is one of the top 5 largest software companies in the world. Their stock is going through the roof right now because there's such correlation between IT, customer experience, CRM. All of that is driving towards a similar outcome of how do you make your customer successful. Part of that is implementation. Part of that is security. Part of that is procurement. Part of that is the how they adopt your product. So this is another signal to say that like customer success is one category, but it scales to all parts of the customer journey. So I think some of the themes this year, which I'm sure you guys can validate, is that I think CS is moving more towards the center. It's going to be a full go-to-market strategic planning and execution effort. They're going to partner more with CFOs, they're going to partner more with VPs of finances, and how do they drive a holistic view. Operations team are going to work closer than ever with engineering team and product teams, because if new business revenue is down, if quota attainment is at an all-time low, and that is what's happening last year, and that is still happening to kick off the year, the only way you can drive more revenue is through your existing customers, and you must have that consolidated view of data, which I'm sure you guys deal with all the time with your customers.
Mm-hmm. And Michael, when I'm listening to Edward, it just makes me think about the uncertainties and the complexity of business today, and of customer success in particular. And in your role as not a software provider, but as a service provider, the head of a service providing company, is there a way you'd like to kind of maybe talk to the audience about certainty and uncertainty? I hope that makes sense. What I'm trying to get at is, I think there's always this little prickling anxiety that people have, especially in customer success right now. And I don't think we have a kind of a calm or safe answer for people, because we just don't know. But I think this merger is a sign of something. And maybe you have some thoughts around how you, in your executive role, would kind of talk to people about this.
As we engage with our customers in the marketplace, Peter, we're doing the same thing and thinking about it the same way. I would describe it a little bit differently, and perhaps describing it in a different way might shed some light on the issue that you're pressing on. And that is, we find that a lot of our customers have a relatively narrow view of customer success, and the deployment of CS inside their organization is relatively narrow based on that. And so hearing that as the before, and the scenario that Edward described as the after, meaning there's a data lake and you have visibility to everything that you need to know about your customer, and you can fully deploy a mature CS practice. In some cases, our customers can get intimidated, or maybe they just don't have a way, maybe it's not intimidation, of getting from the before to the after. It just seems so far away. And I would argue it's really not as far away as it seems, but if it does seem that way, there are ways to take a narrow practice and begin to expand it out methodically, to begin marching towards a much more holistic view of customer success inside of an organization, and getting to that area where your knowledge of your customer base has amped up considerably. I'll just give you one small example that I've seen inside of a lot of organizations, and this has come up in several of our engagements, and that is, when you think about the learning needs of your end users, of our clients' end users that need to understand how to utilize a platform, we have found there's a high correlation between the training and education consumed by those end users and all of the healthy customer metrics: propensity to buy again, likelihood to stay, engagement with the company, things like that. And so it naturally leads to a conversation with CS leaders around, okay, how are you incorporating your training and education offerings into your approach? What do you know about them? And if you're selling learning subscriptions, and we had a customer that we were selling, tens of millions of dollars of learning subscriptions on an annual basis for. Well, right now that it's good in a sense, but now you're also creating potentially another blind spot. And so the data that you would infuse into that to cure the blind spot can also expand out your customer success practice. And most of that data is sitting in a learning management system, right? And so if Edward has a learning subscription and you have a learning subscription, and you've signed up and created username and password, and you're one course into whatever your learning path is, and Edward hasn't created that yet, do we have a way of knowing that? Can I identify that? And can I reach out and take action based on that knowledge? And it could be a simple health index, but it's describing the parameters of what is a healthy customer in this specific context. And so if you're able to do that, number one, you're able to take informed and proactive action into the marketplace. And those are two critical elements of customer success, in my view. Secondarily, you're able to elevate your customer satisfaction by making sure if they took out a subscription, they're getting the value out of that they expected. And third, you are increasing their confidence and their independence and their utilization of the platform, which will show up elsewhere in the business as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a nice comprehensive way to describe it. I'm going to move on to the next question because I think it'll help actually address David Eland's question in the Q&A where he asked about the next 12 to 18 months. The way I wrote this question is I see the merger announcement. I'm deeply involved in the community, and there's a lot of buzz when that was announced. Lots of speculation, really wild discourse. People, predicting all kinds of different things, and that's natural, I think. And especially it was really buzzy, I think, because of what customer success has been through in the last 2 years of high inflation and constrained money supply and all that kind of stuff, resulting in a lot of layoffs and a lot of change for people. So, Edward, again, what are your thoughts on kind of the larger level, what the merger might signal for the world of SaaS, not for the world of SaaS, but in the context of the world of SaaS and enterprise applications that aren't in SaaS, for example, or and even how customer success might want to play a bigger role in those environments? That's pretty big question, I know, but
I think there's a misconception, first of all, that there's a lot of layoffs across the board on CS or CS organizations because of inflation in the economy. There's a lot of layoffs across the board. There's a lot of layoffs on engineering. There's a lot of layoffs on sales. There's a lot of layoffs in marketing. There's a lot of layoffs everywhere. The reason why sometimes CS maybe feels a tad bit more prominent is because we are a very close-knit community and we're very supportive of each other. And you see a lot of folks just constantly pushing out and hiring. And secondly, it's a very, very important function. And the businesses that are doing the best right now are the ones that very early on shifted their CS organization to either partner with sales or to start to create a motion themselves to drive expansion revenue. And a lot of leaders, first thing they say is, you know what, my CSMs don't know how to sell. They don't know how to have commercial conversations. I don't even want them to touch that. Great. But what's also not happening is they know the customers best. They know the customer's pain point. They know the use cases. You as a leader are not pairing and funneling that information to the folks on your team that actually know how to have those commercial conversations. So it's one or the other. You can't do nothing, and we see a lot of leaders doing nothing, and that's where you see team members and layoffs and things bleeding out, is that they're not prepared for that. Mm-hmm. Now, to your question on what this merger means for the market, I think it's great. I think I'd say that we are the early pioneers in this kind of process of a bunch of mergers coming. I think there's going to be a lot more, not in our category specifically, but just in the broader SaaS community, because there is just way too many players out there in every single category. Even in customer success, like there's been a ton of new players that are coming out. And what we're starting to see is that they're all hurting. They all have very difficulties in scaling. They're lacking in resources. And when you have 7 to 8 different players, it creates confusion for the market. How do you take, the second and third place players, combine them together to go after number one? How do you pair the best features of different platforms and go after the market? You see a lot of that on the sales tech side. You see folks like Clary, Gong, Outreach, all starting to build similar features, but is it best in class features? Like Clary recently released Copilot, which is a conversational intelligence tool that Gong has been the core of their business for the past decade. Like, I don't know, I've never used Copilot, but that's another option yet to the different market versus, is it better than what Gong is doing? Is it what the market already has? So I think over the next 12 months, you are going to see a lot of consolidation on tooling, because it just makes a lot of sense, especially if the two companies that are merging have such core fundamental foundations that are similar, like Totango and Catalyst. At the end of the day, we're both customer success platforms. We both have this concept of playbooks. We both have concepts of health scores. We both have concepts of customer journey. We both have campaigns, but there's a huge set of features that do not overlap. how do you take that best of both worlds? How do you take the use cases that we serve, both Totango serving to the enterprise, now Catalyst serving to the SMB and mid-market? Now you have a singular conglomerate that can handle all use cases and a broader set of features that the market just doesn't have. So absolutely, I think this market is going to change. We're going to see a lot of companies doing it. I was at dinner with another CEO. I can't talk about their company, but the first thing he asked me, he's like, "Hey, I heard about your merger, and I actually spoke with a banker immediately to identify other people in my category that we can potentially merge with," because he says growth has slowed. Growth needs to be accelerated. But this is a massive, massive TAM, massive opportunity. But how do we limit the amount of options that the customers in this market has to choose from and make it much more clear to them why you are the definitive choice? So I think there is a lot of opportunity here.
Yeah, lots of opportunities, a lot of challenges ahead too. Michael, I'm thinking of your time at, going back a bit, CenturyLink. I know how massive that company is. They were one of my customers in one of my past lives. You probably experienced a lot of acquisitions during your time there. Do you want to kind of talk a little bit about, in your executive or senior role there, how you and your team kind of looked at how do you handle absorbing, you weren't responsible for integrations probably, but you're probably responsible for understanding how to go to market with new products and stuff like that.
Yeah. And so at that time, Peter, there were internet startup companies that were using a probably artificially elevated stock price, and were unprofitable, but were using that as capital to purchase really big regional Bell operating companies. And so the merger you're referring to is I was with a company called Quest, maybe 3,000 employees and not profitable. Startup internet company building a network, so all the costs associated. And we bought US West, which was a 70,000 person company, very profitable, but antiquated technology that would likely not stay profitable for long. And so, yeah, I was responsible through the field marketing organization that I ran in developing the go-to-market message and delivering that to the sales force, and in some cases delivering it to customers. And if I had to summarize it in one word, and it's a challenging word when you think about the complexities of what I just said, it was simplicity. Customers, they don't really care what you're going through. They really don't. It's a very selfish view, but I think it can be a healthy selfish view if you apply that lens to your business internally. And they don't want multiple contracts, inconsistent features, jumping through hoops to do business with you. And it's how quickly can we present a consolidated solution. And at the time, and this is dating myself, the consolidated solution was you can buy local phone service and long distance phone service from the same company, right? Seems silly that would be profound, that there was a time where you couldn't do that, but that was the market until around 2000, when these mergers happened. That was the business problem that that merger was solving. And so the local service is a very regulated tariffed service. The long distance service is an unregulated service. And so combining those two in a way that made sense to customers was the big challenge. And that was the lens that we built to run it through. How can we make it simple for the end user? Number one, to understand, but number two, to buy from us.
I love that. I think, Edward, you probably agree that you guys are trying to shoot for that, essentially, is simplicity for the end customer who will hopefully leverage the combined power of two products in the future.
I mean, that's a little bit of the sneak preview on upcoming, but the core unified company is going to be powered and driven by the simplicity and the instantaneous ability to get onboarded, the modern UI of what we're doing specifically at Catalyst. And that's the expectation of buyers today, but buyers want both, right? Like I'll never forget, like we were in a deal and with a competitor, and they said, look, You guys won the RFP. We love every aspect. Our team loves your guys' user experience, loves the way that you implement. Our operations person said, this is having had experience using many tools. This was the easiest way for them to configure views for the entire organization to scale this out very quickly. But we can't buy from you guys because our CEO thinks you guys don't have enterprise experience. And that was very disappointing because we won the deal. We won the RFP. Everybody on the team wanted Catalyst. And, that's why for us, that is the opportunity that we have here is now we get to say we have companies like SAP that use the unified organization. We get to say we have companies like Dynatrace and very, very massive, massive organizations and instances that use us. Yet we still have the flavors of the intuitive user experience that brought us here. So yeah, that's exactly what we're pushing towards.
Yeah, it's a really big vision, and I hope it gets realized. I'm going to depart from my standard line of attack here in these webinars, where I just go through my questions, because I think the questions in the Q&A are really good. Dave Jackson's asked a couple. I'd like to kind of bring those in. He's directing it to you, Edward. He says, in your press release, you said a comprehensive solution designed to manage customer relationships by driving recurring success across the post-sale revenue journey. He's wondering, isn't customer-led growth more than post-sale revenue?
Absolutely. But we're not going to change our focus and messaging to the target buyers that we want. What we want to do is empower post-sales teams to have broader conversations beyond just the post-sales teams. What we want to do is coach them how to find different stakeholders in the product and engineering team to gather that data. Coach them on how to have conversations with their CROs or their VP of sales counterpart to drive that conversations. Every conversation, every, sale that we do, every prospective customer that inbounds into Catalyst, we work with them on, hey, this is a great conversation. You guys love this demo, but let's bring in your sales team. Let's have a unification conversation, and every single one of them welcomed that. But to your question, we do target specifically post sales team. It's where our product core focuses are, but it doesn't mean that we're not driving all the other stakeholders in.
Yeah, and Michael, I'm thinking of us, ESG. You mentioned earlier that our clients are focused on very specific kind of like aspects of customer success that they bring us in to help solve for. But I don't know about you, but when I see these questions and I listen to Edward talk about the future of Totango Catalyst, it does raise kind of like exciting opportunities in my mind for ESG. And I'm wondering if you want to have a discussion about that.
Yeah, I think as the perspective of the marketplace, and that would include both our clients and our prospects, expands, horizontally, meaning the capabilities and the expectations for the CS function inside of a company. Yeah, I think the need for the services that we provide and the gaps that we fill expand alongside it. And the exciting thing for me is, there was a time over the last couple of years where you're pulled into an opportunity that is a very, very point specific solution. We have problem X. I need you to help me solve that. And then if you do a great job, we're happy and we move on. Conversations are shifting a little bit, and some of our larger customers are saying things like, our goal is to be good at customer success. And I love that macro level of thinking, because that has a trickle-down effect through all of the processes, the investment, the resources, the headcount allocation, the budget discussions, everything. If that is the goal, and there's alignment on the goal of we want to be good at CS, now we can have a really honest conversation about how are you fulfilling that today? Where are your large gaps? And then typically our role in those scenarios, Peter, is a large company would say, here are my gaps, and here is the prioritized sequence, or we can help them work through that, of how I want to close those gaps. And they might have resources or skills that can solve 50, 60% of those issues, right? And we can, pull up alongside them and be the other 30 or 40%. And that could be just applying additional horsepower so that you're accelerating an outcome, or it could be bringing unique skill sets into the solution set that our client just doesn't have at the moment.
Michael, I love that, because I can't tell you the number of prospective customers that we met with last year that says, or getting RFPs from, and they end up saying, hey, somebody on my team has used X platform before, and this is why this is how we want to do things. And that is the worst way to manage and create success for your post-sales organization. You're dependent upon one person in ops or one person in your CS ops or sales ops's experience to determine the entire way that your post-sales work collaborates. Then you are using a tooling solution to drive your workflows versus, to your point, planning out just how to do customer success well, planning out the workflows irrespective of the tool. And I'm the CEO of a company that sells tooling. And that is the biggest challenge that we see with the market today, is way too many leaders give free reins to their ops people, free reins to their team to say, hey, this is how I've done it before. Let's do it the tooling's way, versus let's really think about what are the problems that we're trying to solve, what are the customer and value and outcomes that our customers are looking to gain from our product, and how is our team partnering with other teams to deliver it.
Yeah. It's a consistent need to elevate the conversation, and there's a certain amount of elevation guys like you and I can do. I get encouraged when I see that elevation happening naturally inside of these companies, and they're starting with a charter, and then we're going to work down from there. The opposite of that in our world would be someone coming to us and saying, can you build me a customer journey map? And the answer, of course, is, well, yeah, we do that all day, every day. But what are you thinking about in terms of your customer success practice? What are you hoping to learn from a customer journey mapping session? And what changes do you have the appetite to make inside of your organization to drive a different outcome? And if we can have that level of conversation, then the journey map folds in as one of the ways that we get you to that outcome. But it's much better to start from the top and work your way down.
I mean, like your ESG logo on the upper left, that's spot on.
So Dave has another question, and I'm not sure how quickly you can answer it, but I do want to touch on it. He asks, do you think the big CRM players, obvious players, we know who they are, will respond to the merger by introducing CS clouds or hubs to fill out their portfolio?
Absolutely. I think they are going to need, and they're probably planning on doing something soon, because it is not a secret in the world that new business revenue was down. It's not a secret in the world that salespeople, or at least new business reps, aren't getting hired at a rate like they're used to. Quotas are being scaled down by more than 30% for almost every business across the board. So that speaks to what the CRM is traditionally used for. It's used to drive new business sales. They don't have a good way of ingesting post-sales data. They aren't designed to unify all the different tool sets that the post-sales team use. They don't give you a full view of customer journey. They aren't able to tie a health score and product adaptation to a renewal committee and the folks that actually make the decisions on the product. They don't have an automated way to drive engagements and touch points and communication from a CSM or from the CS team to help them cover more accounts. So, I mean, the list goes on and on and on about what you're unable to do in a CRM. And yes, can you force function and try to do some of these things in a CRM? I'll be the first to say you absolutely can. But you need hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. You need a significant ops team. You need to do a lot more work, and you need to build. And I spoke with a operations leader at a company that's getting ready to go public soon. And the leader there said, hey, everything that you just showed me and your team just showed me in Catalyst, we have spent trying to build over the past 2 years inside of Salesforce.
Yep.
So if you and your team have, and he said, and the best part about that sentence was, he says, we have a lot of what you guys can do, but there are several things that I'm seeing that I really need that we still can't do after 2 years. So if you have a massive team and you're getting ready to go public and you can afford to spend 2 years rebuilding all the tool sets that are designed for it, then yeah, I think CRM could be a potential option. And I'm sure this is a full cycle journey that they're thinking about on how to unify the entire go-to-market motion from CRM to CSPs to CGP.
Yeah, I think some of these big players have been criticized for a long, long time for some inadequacies around, the customer on the post-sales side. I agree with you. I think they will pursue closing gaps that they perceive, but this should be a very interesting space for the next few years. I think we're not going to see people come.
It's going to get interesting in the next 12 months because right now, the most important conversation that every board is still having today is how do we grow efficiently? I bet every single person on this webinar right now has heard the words grow efficiently more times than they care to want to hear about it ever again. Efficiency is so key to the way businesses to grow. And the only way to do that, there is no way that anyone can argue the most efficient way to grow is through the customers that you already have, to ensure that they have 100% coverage, adoption, leverage across your tool set, to ensure that you've maximized every single dollar that you can extract from them. They are already your champions. There's not much you have to do other than making them successful, which is your job to begin with. And that is why this space, I think, is going to get super interesting over the next 12 months, not just in our category, but in other categories, trying to mold in what does it mean to drive customer-led growth.
Yeah, 100% agree. That's really, go-to-market is really hot, and a lot of people, everyone's trying to figure it out. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I want to switch to kind of a CS adjacent question. It's more about leadership, and you're both CEOs, and I just want to give you both an opportunity to kind of talk about change. Mike, let's start with you. Your perspective as a CEO has to be the entire company, of course. It's different for a guy like me. I can just focus on a particular kind of aspect of our business, but your purview has to be the entire business. So how do you think about your role as the company leader, as the company's main, I call it the change conductor? How do you inspire yourself to be inspirational to the entire company?
Yeah. So a couple things. I think it's my responsibility to be a student of this game and to understand the market and to engage with it consistently so that I have a ton of data points at my disposal to understand a couple critical things. Are we in the right markets, selling the right things with the right people on the team? And those sound like really basic, really simple questions, but there have been times when we haven't had that right, and I see a lot of companies that don't get that right. And getting that right, getting the legs of the stool in place so that we can be effective in the marketplace, I think is critical. So I spend a lot of time thinking about that, and our service catalog today looks vastly different than it did 2 years ago and completely different than it did 10 years ago, right? And that's the result of thinking that way and making sure that we are staying in alignment. I think the other area is making sure that you're setting the course and then reminding and repeating what the objective of the company is for the year ahead. And so, as you know, Peter, we try to, we go through an annual planning process like any other company, and there are, at the bottoms up, there's tactics that support strategic initiatives that support a theme for the year, right? And so it's my role really to understand where we are in the marketplace and come up with what that theme is. And so for this year, we try to condense the theme into 1 or 2 words. The theme for this year is prove it, right? And that's our theme. Like, how do we prove to the marketplace that the services we provide have a positive financial impact on the performance of our customers. Okay. And then underneath that theme, a whole host of things can flow from a strategic initiatives and a tactic standpoint. So I think that's part of my role, is coming up with what that theme is, and then being the person that sticks us to that theme. It is very, very easy to get distracted and wander all over the place within a year. And you're really busy, but you forget what you're trying to do, and you forget what your beacon is, and sometimes you just lose it. So that's part. And I think the last part, to your question, is I inspire myself by just, some of it's just the way you're born and the way you're wired, and some of it is, your desire to succeed, and your desire to win, and your desire to compete in a very competitive marketplace. And so I don't have any trouble with that. Maybe my perspective is a little bit different in terms of how that relates to the team. I don't feel it's really my job to inspire the team. I think you hire people who wake up every day wanting to go succeed, and it's my responsibility to kind of point them in the right direction. And so finding self-starters, finding people who, especially in a remote world, who are outstanding at managing themselves and driving themselves, has been a key to our success.
Yeah, well, that was a really humble response, I think, because I can tell you, you are inspirational, and whether you do it as a kind of intentional tactic or not, I think the company finds you very inspirational. Edward, what are your thoughts on that kind of leadership piece?
Yeah, I think what Michael said about some of the simple things, there have been companies that are killed overnight because they can't sell to the right ICP. Like, as simple as that sounds, that is as critical. So yes, they are simple, but they're still core fundamentals that many businesses miss. I think for Catalyst and now Totango as a unified organization, we have 2x the amount of resources, 2x the amount of team. The family just got twice as big. A bunch of folks that we used to compete with, right? So I think how you become a culture creator, culture carrier, culture leader as a CEO is effective communication, overly communicating. Some people are going to say, you know what, I'm tired of hearing that. But then again, we have Slack channels where we celebrate wins from across the organization. People need to see what's going on. People from engineering need to see that all the hard work that they're doing on engineering is delivering great big outcomes. We just closed a $500,000 deal last Friday. The entire company, even though it was late in Friday afternoon, there was an entire celebration and uproar because it was such a massive win for the business. And how do you share wins? How do you share challenges? How do you share transparency with the organization? What is the goals that you're trying to get to? Where do you currently stand? What's blocking us from getting there? This has been my motto since we started Catalyst, 8 years ago, which is, how do you be transparent? How do you ensure that your team feels like they are an owner of the business and not somebody that's just there to do work? In order for them to feel like an owner, you have to share with them what you guys are discussing in the boardroom. You have to discuss with them on what are the things that only leadership team members should know. All of that information needs to trickle down. It shouldn't be me telling my CTO and my CTO telling the VP, then the VP going to tell the director, then the director telling the manager. That's going to get missed. It needs to be me in the all hands telling everyone, hey, last week we had a board meeting. This is what they like. This is where they saw the challenges. This is what we discussed. Here's some good things that are going well, and here's the big blockers that we have ahead. So to me, the more transparent a leader is, the more you're going to be able to drive change and inspire, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we've got just a few more minutes. I want to get to my final question, but I think the two remaining questions on the Q&A are, you should be able to knock them out pretty quickly, Edward. So Ismail in the Middle East is asking, essentially, it's growing. The market's growing a lot over there, and that's true. I see that myself in my research of CS market. So any plans to expand to the Middle East, and how much do you think the focus will be on the growth of customer success in the Middle East?
Yeah, I think We see a lot of growth, not just in Middle East. We see it in Asia. We see it in Europe. I think the terminology is not necessarily customer success, but like there's a in whatever the native language is and what it means to drive great customer outcomes, we see that as a top priority. And I think where and why we see such expansion into regions outside of the US is, to my earlier point, the ability and the need to access data is becoming very, very clear to folks. With AI and everyone wanting to be an AI, that's often the biggest misconception. People think you could just start doing AI tomorrow and you can just turn it on and start getting insights and analysis that you've never seen before, like a genie in a bottle. That couldn't be farther from the truth. There's got to be a solid data foundation. There's got to be a core and fundamental understanding of how your customers use the product or what are they not using. And a lot of businesses are barely there yet. So absolutely, our goal is to eventually expand into Asia, Middle East, and Europe even more dramatically. Totango already has a large presence in Europe that Catalyst didn't have. That's another reason why we went there. And our goal is to continue to expand internationally. So it's coming, but I don't have a official date yet when.
Well, that's fair. Yeah, and that's kind of the answer I expected, because Totango does have a long history now of being around for a while, and I know that they're over there already. So, final Q&A question from the audience: when do you aim to have the merger finalized, both in terms of business and products, and what's the next biggest goal after the merger?
Yeah, we've already started. I don't know if that was I don't know if this was the right thing to do, but before the docs were signed, before we unified all the legal paperwork, we already started the merger. Like we just said, look, if this thing doesn't work, if this thing doesn't close for legal reasons, then it was never meant to be. And also, we just wanted to put the pressure on ourselves to say, hey, this has got to work because we spent a lot of effort doing it. So the merger process already started in November, and we expect it to be done this summer. And it's around the corner. It's a lot of work behind the scenes is going. So both from a product and business perspective, we've got a couple of big, exciting announcements that I will not be announcing on this call, but stay tuned for the summer timeframe. It's going to be hard not to hear about an update from us that's coming. In terms of, what's next, I think it's exactly what the market needs, is that we're going to have best-in-class product, the only product that is the end-to-end experience, from the best user experience, best UI, that scales with you, whether you're an SMB mid-market all the way to an enterprise like an SAP. And lastly, we have a couple of exciting AI features that are already out, but there's a couple ones that are coming ahead in the summer, but I'm going to save that for the announcement as well.
Yeah.
Appreciate everyone's patience on that.
I look forward to seeing all that. So, final question for each of you. I ask all my guests this question. What book would you recommend to the audience? Related to the topic, doesn't have to be strictly about mergers and acquisitions or even customer success, but something that would be help inform the thought process around it. I'll start with you, Michael.
So I will start with a confession. I don't read business books. I find them incredibly boring and incredibly prescriptive. Do these 3 things and your company can only succeed. And I don't buy it, my friends. So what I do, and it also eliminates the need for me to have to synthesize things intellectually into a business mode. So I read books that interest me, and then I go through a mental exercise of, what does that tell me about my business environment? So I'm always thinking about business, but here's an example. The book I'm reading right now is the biography of Evel Knievel. And for any of you that are, growing up in the 70s, Evel Knievel invented a genre, right? Jumping over buses and over Caesar's Palace fountain in Las Vegas. But it is the story of someone who just decided he wanted a better life and took enormous risks to make the life he wanted happen. And I think there are some obvious parallels, right, for the business world, and some obvious parallels for customer success. leaders who may feel like they are, midair on a motorcycle at bus 5 on a 12 bus jump that you're trying to do, and you have to stick to landing. And how he did that, how he bounced back from failure because he often wrecked the bike, and you had to get up and heal in time for the next jump because that was on national TV. I just find that process of people that don't see obstacles and only see opportunity, I find that perspective to be very challenging and very rewarding.
That's great. That's really good
I'm
one.
gonna
How
talk
about you?
super fast because I have a customer meeting that started at 4:30 Eastern. And what kind of CEO would I be if I don't put customers first? So the book that I'm gonna recommend to everyone is a book called Discipline is Destiny. It's a book by Ryan Holiday. It goes through different examples from very famous people, from Queen Elizabeth to a lot of very prominent leaders on how disciplined they are to driving greatness and growth. And I think we live in a day and an age where people want things yesterday. People want instant gratification, but a lot of success and hard work comes from discipline. So highly recommend to everyone. I do have to run to a customer meeting.
Thank you, Edward.
Thanks, Peter and Michael.
Thanks for all your time. Thanks, Michael. And everyone in the audience, thanks for attending. Really look forward to seeing you at the next one next month.
Yep. Thanks, Peter.
Bye for now.